The day before the wedding, my future daughter-in-law texted me, "You're not invited. Only real family belongs here." I answered with just one sentence. The next morning, the venue called her and the whole wedding vanished into thin air. One day before the wedding, my son's fiancée Lauren shot me a short text. "You're not welcome at the wedding," it said plain as day. "Only real family gets to be here." I was sitting at my kitchen table phone in my steady hand, reading those cold words twice over. My heart didn't race. I didn't cry. Instead, I took a slow sip of my black coffee, set the mug down quietly, and typed one precise reply: "Fine. Then real family can pay for the venue themselves." I hit send. I figured Lauren's mom, Diane, was probably right there beside her. They'd read it, laugh out loud, and write me off as some bitter, powerless old woman. Diane would tell Lauren I was just bluffing, that I'd show up the next morning with an apology and my checkbook. Boy, were they wrong. My husband passed away 5 years ago. Since then, I've lived alone in our house. My son Ethan is 32, a quiet guy who's always been a little too passive for his own good. 3 years back, he brought Lauren home. She was ambitious, controlling, and had everything mapped out. When they announced their engagement 6 months ago, it became crystal clear they couldn't swing the fancy estate venue on their own. The deposit alone was steep, around $10,000. Ethan sat on my couch and stayed silent. Lauren talked about how family supports each other. So I signed the contract. My name, my signature, my card. I covered the deposit, the catering, the flowers, close to $35,000 total. I did it for my son. But with every dollar, Lauren started seeing me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. The respect evaporated. She acted like my money was hers by right. Thing is, I'm no pushover widow. I've got clear boundaries, and she had just stomped all over them. The planning had turned into a quiet power struggle I watched unfold. My patience had run out. I glanced at the folder in my drawer with my name on every page. I took a deep breath and knew exactly what I'd do first thing in the morning. The process of freezing me out of my own son's wedding didn't start with some big blow-up. It crept in slow. 3 weeks after I signed for the estate, I noticed the first shift. I'd invited Ethan and Lauren over for dinner to talk menu details. Lauren sat at my table, pushing veggies around her plate and glued to her phone. When I asked about the appetizers, she barely looked up. "Mom and I already handled it," she said casually. "We went with the pricier filet mignon option. No need for you to worry about it." I set my fork down. That upgrade ran another couple $1,000 straight off my account, no discussion. I didn't blow up. I got watchful. I glanced at Ethan. He dropped his eyes and took a big gulp of water. Conflict was never his thing. The next day, I logged into my online banking and canceled the automatic payment for Ethan's car insurance I'd been covering out of habit for years. If Lauren could order fancy steak without asking, they could handle their own bills. I didn't call to argue. I just acted. A few days later, I got booted from the wedding planning group chat. Lauren claimed it was an accident when she made a new one. But the florist invoices kept landing in my email, full of notes and changes, clearly hashed out in a chat I no longer had access to. Lauren and Diane had taken full control. They picked the music, the table linens, the photographer. They treated me like a silent cash machine humming in the background while they soaked up the spotlight. I said nothing. I just quietly collected every email confirmation and contract into a blue folder on my desk. Every single one had only my full name on it. That gave me silent, ironclad control over the whole thing. I just waited calmly to see what they'd pull next. The next slap came 4 weeks before the big day. Lauren and Diane had set up a big walkthrough at the estate with the event manager to rehearse the timeline. I only found out by chance when Ethan mentioned offhand on the phone that he had to head there that afternoon. I decided to show up unannounced. When I walked into the grand hall, Diane and Lauren were standing among the beautifully set tables, barking orders. The manager, Mrs. Hayes, was scribbling notes on her clipboard. I slipped in quietly. Diane spotted me first. Her smile froze for a split second before she turned to Mrs. Hayes. "Our family is covering the entire champagne toast," she announced, proudly gesturing at Lauren. "Only the best for our guests. Our family. We." I stood right there listening as Diane took credit for money that had come 100% from my account. Mrs. Hayes glanced my way. She knew who the actual contract holder was. I gave her the tiniest nod. No way was I making a scene then and there. Instead, I went back to my car, drove home, and opened my laptop. Weeks earlier, Lauren had asked me to front part of their honeymoon in Italy. I'd agreed and put down the deposit. Now I called the travel agency and removed my card from the final payment for the flights and hotel. "Let the young couple handle the rest themselves," I told the nice agent. I started quietly unwinding my financial ties one by one, smooth and efficient. 3 days later, Ethan called because his card got declined at the gas station. The insurance payment had hit. "You're a grown man, Ethan," I said, calmly, and hung up. He needed to learn my support wasn't some endless entitlement. My preparations for the worst-case scenario kicked into high gear while they kept planning clueless. They really thought they could treat me like I was invisible and get away with it. But I knew this road was headed straight for a crash. A week before the wedding, the disrespect hit a whole new level. I was out front trimming my roses that morning when the mail arrived. Among the letters was a big envelope from the printer. Since I'd paid for the stationery, they'd accidentally sent me the final proof of the seating chart. I carried it to the kitchen table, poured a fresh coffee, and spread out the heavy paper. My eyes went straight to the head table in the center. There were Ethan, Lauren, Diane's family, and Lauren's closest friends. My name was nowhere. I kept scanning table 234. Nothing. Finally, I spotted it at table 9, way in the back corner by the kitchen door and restrooms. They'd stuck me with some of Lauren's distant co-workers I'd never even met. It was a deliberate, icy humiliation. They wanted my money, but they sure didn't want me in the wedding photos. I didn't grab the phone to complain to Ethan. I didn't shed any tears of disappointment either. I folded the chart neatly, slipped it into my blue folder with the rest of the contracts, and closed it. That same afternoon, I drove to the hardware store. Ethan still had a key to my house. He'd drop by uninvited to raid the fridge or borrow tools. I bought a new deadbolt and swapped out the cylinder myself that evening. Took me less than 20 minutes. No one was walking into my house anymore without my say-so. I was drawing my own quiet lines. Lauren thought she could push me to the sidelines. She had no idea I'd already stepped out of the room and started making my own moves. That blue folder on my desk felt like a loaded gun, just waiting for the right moment. I wasn't about to let anyone treat me like some annoying freeloader in my own family, especially not with my own money. The big day was barreling closer. 2 days before the wedding, chaos was swirling in Lauren's world, while my house stayed perfectly calm. I was out on the patio reading a book when my phone rang. It was Diane. She sounded frazzled and way too loud. "Martha, we've got a little issue." She started no hello. "The makeup artist for the bride wants cash the morning of the wedding. Lauren and I have hit our limit this week. You need to pull $500 tomorrow and bring it to the hotel." She didn't ask. She demanded like I was on-call staff. "I'm not a bank, Diane," I said evenly. "You two have been handling the extra budget. I'm not dropping off cash." There was a short, stunned silence. "You want to ruin your daughter-in-law's day?" she hissed. "That's incredibly selfish." Then she hung up. An hour later, Ethan tried to let himself in. I heard his old key scraping uselessly in the new lock from the living room. He jiggled the handle, then rang the doorbell like crazy. I cracked the door open just a sliver. "Mom, why doesn't my key work?" he asked, confused and a little panicked. "Lauren's crying." You have to give us the makeup money. Please don't make this harder. I looked at my son. He wasn't defending me, he was just demanding my help again. The key doesn't work because this is my house, Ethan, I said firmly. And my money is my money. Figure it out yourselves. I closed the door before he could reply and locked it. I felt zero guilt, just icy clarity. That was the moment Lauren decided to ban me from her perfect wedding for good. She wanted payback for me saying no, and she reached for what she thought was her trump card. She had no clue what she was about to unleash. Her arrogant move to punish me by cutting me out was the biggest mistake she'd make that weekend. She'd completely forgotten who held all the real strings and whose signature was on every part of the event. That brings us back to the night before the wedding. To the text, Lauren sent, "You're not welcome. Only real family belongs here." My reply was already sent. Fine. Then real family can pay for the venue themselves. After I set the phone aside, I pulled out the blue folder and reread the estate's cancellation policy. Canceling less than 24 hours out meant losing the $10,000 deposit. I knew that and accepted it. It was the price of my peace of mind. But the remaining $25,000 for catering staff and drinks wouldn't come off my card if the event didn't happen. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. I slept like a baby that night. No tears, no tossing and turning. At 7 sharp the next morning, I sat at the table with a fresh cup of coffee and dialed Mrs. Hayes. She picked up on the third ring. I could hear dishes clinking in the background. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. This is Martha Caldwell," I said, voice steady and calm. "I'm canceling the entire event for today. The wedding is not happening." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you absolutely sure the tables are already half set?" "I'm completely sure," I confirmed. "My name is on the contract. I'm instructing you to stop all services on my dime. Please email me the cancellation confirmation." Mrs. Hayes was a pro. She asked no personal questions and promised to handle it right away. Then I called the florist and did the exact same thing. 10 minutes later, Lauren's dream wedding was legally and practically gone. I switched my phone to silent, set it on the windowsill, and enjoyed a relaxed breakfast. I knew exactly what kind of storm was about to hit on the other side of town. But it wasn't my problem anymore. If someone treats you like an unwanted stranger, they can't expect you to keep playing generous host. Reality was about to catch up with them fast. I heard what went down in Lauren's hotel room later from my sister, who still had loose ties to some of the guests. Around 9:30 that morning, while Lauren was getting her hair pinned up, Diane's phone rang. It was Mrs. Hayes from the estate. She politely explained that the staff had been pulled and the gates were locked. The contract holder had canceled everything. Diane laughed, at first disbelieving. "This has to be a joke," she supposedly yelled. "We're showing up in 3 hours with 80 guests. I'm sorry, but without approval from Mrs. Caldwell and immediate payment of the $25,000, we can't proceed," came the cool reply. Panic exploded. Lauren ripped off her robe and started calling me once, 5 times, 10 times. My phone stayed silent on the windowsill. Then Ethan called. When I finally checked the screen, there were 20 missed calls. I decided to pick up the 21st. Mom Ethan practically screamed into the phone, his voice shaking. "The estate won't let anyone in. They say you canceled. Please tell me this is some mistake." "It's no mistake, Ethan," I said, completely composed. "Lauren texted me yesterday that I'm not real family and I'm not welcome. I'm not dropping $35,000 on a party where I'm not wanted." "But we don't have a venue," he cried, desperate. Diane made a big show 4 weeks ago at the rehearsal dinner about how her family was covering the costs, I reminded him matter-of-factly. "So let her do it now. I'm out. Goodbye." I hung up. No tears on my end. No regret. I'd spent years shielding Ethan from the consequences of his own passivity. That ended right then. Lauren had pushed the game too far, and now she was trapped in the corner her own arrogance had built. They thought they could humiliate me and still use my credit card. Real life doesn't work that way. I poured myself another cup of coffee and savored the peaceful quiet in my own house while their world came crashing down. Since they couldn't scrape together the 25 grand to buy back the estate that day, Ethan and Lauren had to improvise. My sister filled me in on every painful detail later. In total panic, Diane moved the whole reception to her tiny suburban backyard. 80 guests in suits and fancy dresses suddenly found themselves on uneven grass next to a rusty grill and wobbly plastic chairs. No champagne toast, no filet mignon, no professional photographer. Diane's husband had rushed to the nearest grocery store and grabbed cases of cheap sparkling wine, pre-made potato salad, and packaged brats. Guests were whispering. In a small town, stories like this spread like wildfire. Someone had seen Lauren's nasty text to me in the group chat and shared it. Soon, every person in that backyard knew the bride had coldly uninvited her own mother-in-law, the one who'd paid for the entire thing the night before. The looks Lauren got were brutal. She stood there in her expensive white gown surrounded by paper plates and mustard bottles. Ethan looked pale and shattered the whole afternoon. He'd finally realized my endless protection was gone. When rain started late in the day and there was no tent, most guests bailed early for their cars. The dream wedding they'd planned on my dime had turned into a total nightmare. And it happened without lawyers, police, or screaming matches. I'd simply used my contractual rights as the paying client and pulled my financial support the moment basic respect was denied. While they stood in the drizzle trying to shield that cheap grill from the weather, I sat dry and comfortable in my living room reading a good book. I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy weight of constantly being responsible for other people's happiness and entitled demands had finally lifted off my shoulders. I didn't regret my choice for 1 second. It was the wake-up call my son and his arrogant wife desperately needed. They'd bet big and lost everything. 2 weeks after the wedding fiasco, Ethan showed up unannounced at my new securely locked front door. I saw him through the window. He looked exhausted, shoulders slumped. I opened the door, but kept him on the welcome mat. "Can we talk, Mom?" he asked, quietly, avoiding my eyes. "We can talk, but you're not coming inside today," I answered calmly, leaning against the doorframe. He swallowed hard. "Lauren's furious. Diane won't speak to us. We burned through our savings covering some of the hotel bills ourselves." "Why did you do this to us?" I shook my head slowly. "I didn't do anything to you, Ethan. Lauren uninvited me. I just stopped being an ATM for people who treat me like garbage. And you stood by and said nothing. That silence was your choice." He tried excuses, stressed misunderstandings. I didn't let him slide. "You're married now," I cut in evenly. "You chose your new family. I accept that. But from here on, that family pays its own way. There are no more open bills on my table." I held out my open hand. "Give me back your old house key, please. It doesn't work anymore anyway, but I want it returned." He stared at me in disbelief, then slowly reached into his jacket pocket and dropped the useless key into my palm. That little piece of metal held all the symbolism of our new relationship. Unlimited access to me and my resources was over for good. I'd spent years thinking I had to sacrifice to earn my son's love. But real love doesn't keep demanding financial proof and doesn't tolerate that level of disrespect. Ethan finally turned and walked slowly back to his car. I closed the front door firmly behind him. There was no big explosion, no wild yelling, no tears. Just a clear, healthy boundary I should have set a lot sooner. I knew the road ahead would finally be peaceful. 6 months have passed since that disastrous wedding. My life has changed completely, but for the better. I'm breathing easier than ever. My finances, which had been strained for years by Ethan and then Lauren's endless wants, all have bounced back strong. I used the money I saved by canceling the estate to finally build the sunroom my late husband Thomas and I had always dreamed about. I sit there every morning now with my coffee surrounded by my plants, soaking in the perfect quiet. Ethan texts only occasionally, a quick happy birthday, a short Easter greeting. He and Lauren are in a small apartment, pinching every penny now that my safety net is completely gone. My sister says Lauren still complains bitterly about me in family circles, but no one really listens anymore. Everyone knows the truth about the collapsed celebration. I've learned you can't buy respect with endless generosity. You earn it with clear boundaries. When someone demands you disappear but still expects you to pay the bills, there's only one logical move. Take your money and walk away with your head held high. I didn't need elaborate revenge plots, expensive lawsuits, or dramatic showdowns to protect myself. Simply controlling my own finances and my own front door key was enough to end the unhealthy dynamic for good. I'm no longer the quiet, exploitable widow in the background. I'm Martha. I own my house. I run my own life, and I alone decide who earns a seat at my table. Lauren wanted a wedding without me. She got one, but she paid the full, painful price for her arrogance. My new life is quiet, self-directed, and full of dignity. And that's the greatest gift I've ever given myself. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the moment you stop paying to be overlooked.